They say time heals all wounds, but they rarely tell you that time also hides things. Especially July. There's something about this month that dulls our awareness. The sun stretches long into the evening. The air is thick but strangely forgiving, and everything around us whispers, "You're safe now." That illusion, that's the danger. Because just when you start to let your guard down, when you finally exhale and think you've made it through something, life shows you that it's been holding a card behind its back the whole time, and that card is never a kind one. You see, the last week of July doesn't come with warnings. It doesn't knock. It slides into our lives unnoticed, veiled in normalcy, and that's the part that disturbs me most. How silent it is. The birds still sing. People still laugh. Cars still move through the streets like they always do. And while all of that carries on, something else is taking place. Quietly, relentlessly, without mercy. There's this subtle shift, like a cold breath against the back of your neck in a warm room, and most people don't even feel it. But if you've lived long enough, if you've watched closely, you know. You start to recognize the pattern, the stillness before something breaks. It's not the chaos that surprises us, it's the calm, the fake peace that stretches over the days like a smooth layer of ice over deep water. You think you can stand on it, you trust it, but it cracks without a sound. And by the time you realize what's happened, someone's already gone under. That's how the last week of July works. It doesn't scream, it seduces. It convinces you that everything's fine until it's not, until the phone rings, until the silence in someone's eyes becomes permanent, until that message arrives and you stare at it, hoping it's a mistake. I've seen people lose everything in this week. Not because of some dramatic external disaster, but because they didn't notice the signs inside. Because the weather was too beautiful to imagine a storm. Because the routine kept moving and nobody paused long enough to ask the hard questions. Are you okay? Are you holding it together? Or just pretending? Do you still want to be here? These are questions we forget to ask when the world looks normal. And July, it's the master of looking normal. But underneath that normal is exhaustion. The kind people don't talk about, the kind they smile through. By the time July ends, the year has already demanded too much from some people. Their strength is spent, but they still show up. They still smile. They still tell you they're fine. And that's why this week is so dangerous. Because it's not about what you see. It's about what you don't. It's about what's hiding behind those eyes that won't meet yours for too long. It's about the sudden silence from someone who used to text back right away. It's about a subtle shift in someone's tone. A pause too long, a laugh that doesn't ring true anymore. The illusion of normalcy, it blinds us. And if we're not careful, it costs us. We miss things, we miss people, we miss that last chance to say, "I see you." And sometimes that chance never comes back. That's the weight of this final week. It's not loud. It's not obvious. It's quiet and smooth and deadly, like a calm sea just before the undertow. And unless we learn to pay attention, unless we learn to trust that uneasy feeling we get even when everything looks fine, we'll keep losing people. We'll keep walking past the edge thinking it's just another day. But it's not just another day. Not this week. And once you see that, once you've lost someone to it, you never look at this week the same way again. It's easy to believe that death is loud, that it comes with warning signs, with chaos, with sirens, with screams. But the truth is, more often than not, it slips in through the cracks. No announcement, no headline, just absence. And that's why this particular week, the last days of July, haunts me. Because every year, if you look close enough, if you're paying attention, something strange happens. People vanish from the fabric of their lives. Not always physically. Sometimes it's more subtle than that. Sometimes they just disappear inside themselves. Quietly, repeatedly, and we don't talk about it. There's a pattern here that most people don't notice. You have to be still to feel it. You have to know what silence sounds like when it's not peace. It's distance. That kind of silence starts to hum around this time of year, like the air itself is holding its breath. And I'm not just speaking metaphorically. The data backs it up. Emergency rooms get busier, mental health hotlines spike. Heart attacks, suicides, accidents that shouldn't have happened. It's as though the pressure builds up all month long, and then something snaps. But only for those who've already been walking the edge for far too long. But here's the thing no one wants to admit: this isn't random. This isn't coincidence. It's a pattern. And the most dangerous part, it hides in plain sight. Because while most of the world is busy soaking in the last rays of summer, while vacations are posted and barbecues are planned, someone somewhere is crumbling quietly, and no one sees it coming. Not because it's invisible, but because we're too distracted to look. You might be surprised by how many losses we overlook simply because they don't make noise. A colleague stops showing up, and we tell ourselves they're probably on leave. A friend doesn't answer a call, and we assume they're just busy. Someone we love becomes distant, and we label it a phase. Meanwhile, something deeper is happening. They're slipping, and they're hoping someone notices before it's too late. But most of the time, no one does. This week has taken more than its fair share. Ask around quietly. You'll find stories. She was doing fine. He had plans for next month. They seemed so happy just a few days ago. These aren't anomalies, they're echoes. And the echo always sounds the same: confusion, disbelief, guilt. That heavy feeling of, how did we miss it? But we did, and we do. Again and again. You see, when something keeps repeating itself, it stops being an accident. It becomes a message. And the message is this: we are not paying attention. Not the way we should. Not when it matters most. We have all these connections, texts, notifications, updates. And yet somehow, the deeper connection, the human one, slips away when it's needed most. That's how the last week of July claims its victims. Not through force, but through neglect. What's cruel about this pattern is that it offers no closure. Just blank spaces. Just a name you don't see online anymore. A conversation that never continued. A life that stopped quietly, with no fanfare, and the world just moved on. That's what gets me. The way we move on. The way we bury things under distractions and call it healing. But some things aren't meant to be buried so quickly. Some things are warnings. And this week has been trying to warn us for a long time. I don't think it's enough to survive this season. I think we need to understand it. We need to sit with it. And more importantly, we need to notice the people around us. Not the surface version, but what's underneath. That colleague who hasn't spoken much lately. That friend who posts less and less. That loved one who says, "I'm tired," too often and too quietly. We need to learn how to hear what isn't being said. Because what hides in silence doesn't stay hidden forever. It shows up eventually, in headlines, in hushed conversations, in gravestones. And by then, it's always too late. There's a kind of pressure that builds without making a sound. It doesn't come from outside. It brews within. And it's deceptive because it doesn't always look like suffering. Sometimes it wears a smile. Sometimes it shows up to work on time. Sometimes it even makes you laugh. But deep down, it's cracking. Quietly. Bit by bit. That's what the end of July does to people. It doesn't come with storms or fireworks. It just piles up everything that hasn't been dealt with until it finally breaks through the surface. By the time we reach the last week of the month, so many are already carrying too much. The weight of promises they didn't keep, goals they missed, relationships that fractured, things they were supposed to get better at, but didn't. And July becomes this silent checkpoint, this invisible deadline where people look back and think, how did I end up here again? Half the year is gone, and instead of progress, all they see is pressure. And it sits on their chest like a stone, tightening, suffocating. You'd think they'd talk about it, right? That they'd open up, say something, reach out. But no, because we've built a world where breaking down is seen as weakness. Where pain has to be disguised, not shared. So people do what they've been taught. They hide it, they bury it, they become experts at holding it together on the outside while falling apart inside. And what's terrifying is how normal they look while it's happening. I've seen it too many times. People who seem like they have it all figured out, who never ask for help, who always say, "I'm fine," and then suddenly they're gone, or they hit a wall so hard it takes months to recover, if they recover at all, and we're left stunned, asking questions, wishing we had noticed. But the truth is, most of them didn't want us to notice. They were too ashamed to be seen unraveling. This week, more than any other, becomes a breeding ground for internal collapse. It's not just because of what's happened during the year. It's because of what hasn't happened. The healing that didn't come, the peace that never arrived, the quiet battles no one checked in on. And you'd be amazed how many people hit their limit in July. Not because something new went wrong, but because they've been pretending for too long that everything was right. What makes it worse is how isolating that experience is. There's this unspoken rule: everyone's supposed to be happy now. It's summer. People are taking trips, smiling in photos, laughing in parks. And if you're the one who feels like screaming into a pillow or disappearing completely, you start thinking something's wrong with you. You feel like you're the only one breaking while everyone else is blooming. But the truth is, you're not alone. There are so many others quietly falling apart at the same time, but none of them want to say it first. This emotional silence, it's the real danger. Because people don't just collapse out of nowhere. It builds, like pressure inside a sealed jar. You keep tightening the lid, you keep shaking it, and eventually it explodes. The final week of July becomes that explosion point for far too many people. And what's most tragic is how preventable it could have been. If someone had asked the right question, if someone had listened past the automatic, "I'm fine," if someone had noticed the subtle change in energy, in tone, in presence. But we've become so accustomed to staying on the surface, to respecting boundaries that are really just walls, to not wanting to intrude. And so we lose people, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually, before we even realize they were drifting. This isn't about fixing anyone. It's not about offering solutions. It's about presence. It's about honesty. It's about creating spaces where people can be real without fear. Because if we keep letting the pressure build in silence, then this cycle will never end. People will keep collapsing, and will keep saying, "I had no idea." But deep down we did. We just didn't know how to ask. And sometimes that's all it would have taken. One question, one moment of real attention, one person choosing not to look away. There's this idea that floats around like a safety net: next month will be better. We say it without thinking. We hold on to it when the days feel heavy, and we offer it to others like a promise we believe in. August is just around the corner, and August sounds softer somehow. It feels like relief, like a clean slate, like the pressure will magically lift just because the calendar flips. But that's the lie. That's the quiet trick time plays on us. Because healing doesn't follow the clock, and peace doesn't arrive just because we changed the date. I've seen people hang everything on that belief. If I can just get through July, I'll be okay. It becomes their mantra. And at first glance, it sounds hopeful, even noble. Survive the storm, make it to calmer waters. But what if those calmer waters never come? What if August brings the same weight, the same emptiness, the same noise in your head that kept you up in July? Then what? That's the danger with putting your salvation in a future moment. It keeps you disconnected from the present. You stop paying attention to the now. You start dragging yourself through the days instead of actually living them. You stop asking for help because you're trying to prove to yourself that you can hold out just a little longer. But the human spirit doesn't work like that. You can't run on fumes forever. You can't keep telling yourself tomorrow will fix what you're unwilling to face today. And here's the heartbreaking part. Some people don't make it to August. They carry that pain, that silent desperation, right up to the edge, and then they fall. Not because they were weak, not because they didn't try, but because they truly believed they had to endure it alone, because they thought admitting they were drowning meant they'd failed. So they kept quiet, they kept pretending, they kept hoping that just one more week would be enough. But that hope can be a trap when it's used as a way to avoid the truth. And the truth is, most people don't need a new month. They need a new way of seeing themselves. They need someone to sit beside them in the middle of the storm and say, "You don't have to get through this alone. You don't have to wait for some magical day on the calendar to matter. You already do." We've created a culture where endurance is praised more than honesty, where survival is seen as strength, even when it's breaking us from the inside. We glorify the ones who push through without ever asking what it costs them. But there's no trophy for making it to August if you've lost parts of yourself along the way. If you've silenced your pain, buried your needs, and masked your fear just to reach some imaginary finish line, then what are you really celebrating? I've watched people hold on with white knuckles to that phrase, "just a few more days." And I've watched them disappear before they ever got there. Not because they didn't want to live, but because they were exhausted, because they were so focused on the next chapter that they forgot they were allowed to ask for a different ending in this one. And the silence that follows those losses, it's deafening. So if you're someone who's been quietly whispering that to yourself, "Next month will be better," pause. Not to let go of hope, but to recognize that you don't have to defer your healing. You don't have to wait until everything aligns. You can speak now, you can reach out now, you can break the pattern before it breaks you. And maybe, just maybe, you'll realize that the power was never in the next month. It was in the choice to show up for yourself today. Because sometimes, the most dangerous words we ever say are, "I'll deal with it later." This week took someone. Maybe you didn't notice. Maybe you did, but the world didn't. Because that's the thing about loss. It doesn't always come crashing through the front door. Sometimes it slips out the back quietly, without a sound, and we don't even realize something's missing until we feel the cold space where warmth used to be. And when it happens in this week, the final days of July, it becomes just another day that passes, just another name left out of the conversation, just another story we never ask about. You might not know their name, but someone does. Someone lit a candle in their memory. Someone is staring at their phone, hoping for one last message that will never come. Someone keeps waking up in the middle of the night, forgetting for a second that they're gone. And then remembering all over again. And the rest of us, we keep scrolling, we keep walking, we keep posting. Because the world doesn't pause anymore, not even for death, especially not the quiet kind. This isn't about pointing fingers. This isn't about blame. It's about blindness. The kind of blindness that becomes normal after a while. We've become so used to grief being invisible that we barely notice when it moves through the room. We talk about mental health when it's trending. We mention suicide once a year in a post with a ribbon. We throw around words like check-in and self-care, but forget to actually stop, sit down, and really see the people around us. Not just what they're posting, but what they're carrying. There's a story buried in plain sight, and this week reveals it more than any other. It's the story of people who didn't make it. Not because they weren't strong, not because they didn't fight, but because no one saw the war they were fighting. We assumed they were okay because they smiled. We assumed they were fine because they showed up. But showing up doesn't mean surviving. Smiling doesn't mean safe. Some people become experts at pretending, and we reward them for it. We call them resilient. We call them inspiring. And then we're shocked when they disappear. There's a sickness in that, in how we've trained ourselves to look away from what's uncomfortable. How we only ask, "Are you okay?" when it's convenient, and only listen to the answer we want to hear. And all the while this pattern continues, especially now, in this strange pocket of time at the end of July, when everything seems still on the outside, but storms are breaking loose inside people's minds. It's not just personal, it's collective. If you really pay attention, you start to see it everywhere. A coworker suddenly using fewer words, a friend pulling back slowly over weeks, someone who used to laugh loud now just nods. These aren't coincidences. These are cracks forming. But we've become so good at ignoring them that we don't notice until after the fall. And even then, we whisper about it instead of speaking up. We call it tragedy. We call it unexpected. But is it? Or did we just refuse to look when the signs were there? This week is full of ghosts we don't name, and not just the ones who are gone, but the ones still here, barely. The ones clinging on by threads, waiting for someone to see them before they fade completely. They don't always say anything. They rarely ask for help. But if you pause, really pause, you can feel them. In the way they hesitate before answering. In the delay before replying. In the moments of silence that stretch just a second too long. We have to stop waiting until it's too late. We have to stop brushing these losses off as anomalies or bad luck. They're not. They're consequences of a world that moves too fast, listens too little, and assumes too much. And until we start naming these patterns, recognizing these quiet departures, we'll keep losing people we could have saved. If only we had looked up in time. Because when you lose someone to silence, the loudest sound left behind is your own regret. There's something about this last week, this stretch of quiet days at the end of July, that demands more than reflection. It demands presence. It doesn't want us to just look back and feel sad about what we lost. It wants something from us. Something now. Because this isn't just a week where things happen. It's a week that reveals what we've been missing. And once you've seen it, once you've felt the weight of someone disappearing into silence, once you've heard the echo of a laugh that isn't coming back, you can't pretend anymore. You can't look away. But even then, the question becomes, what do we do? When you know this week has a pattern, when you've seen the way it quietly takes from people, how do you respond? It's not about fixing the world. You can't save everyone. You're not meant to. That pressure alone can break you. But maybe it's not about saving everyone. Maybe it's about noticing the one person right in front of you. Maybe it's about choosing to show up, not in some grand, heroic way, but in the kind of way that feels small, almost invisible, but makes all the difference. We think we need the right words, some perfect thing to say that will pull someone out of the darkness. But you don't. You just need to be there. To sit with someone without trying to solve them, to listen without needing to respond, to ask how someone is doing and stay long enough to hear the real answer, not just the one they give out of habit. And that takes presence, that takes patience, that takes a willingness to slow down when everything else around us says speed up. This week doesn't demand noise, it demands depth. It demands we look past the surface, past the smile, past the "I'm fine," and really pay attention. You don't need to know what someone is going through to be there for them. You just need to care enough not to walk away. You just need to mean it when you ask, "Are you okay?" That one question, asked at the right time, from the right place in your heart, can keep someone from falling. I think the most powerful thing we can do in this season isn't to say something profound. It's to stay in the conversation a little longer, to stay present when someone drifts, to stay connected when everything in them wants to pull away, because presence is what saves people. Not advice, not analysis, just presence. Just knowing that someone sees them, that someone stayed. There's a responsibility that comes with knowing. If you've lost someone to this week, if you've ever watched someone disappear while the world kept turning, then you already carry that weight. But it's not just grief. It's a kind of insight, a kind of calling. It's a chance to make sure that maybe next time, someone isn't alone. Someone isn't overlooked, and you're the one who notices. Not because you're a hero, but because you paid attention. That's how the cycle breaks. That's how the silence gets interrupted. Not by shouting over it, but by showing up in the middle of it with steady eyes and an open heart. And yeah, sometimes you'll get it wrong. Sometimes people won't want to talk. Sometimes they'll shrug you off. But sometimes they won't. Sometimes they'll pause, hesitate, and then exhale. Sometimes they'll realize that maybe, just maybe, someone sees them. And that's everything. You don't need to save the world. You just need to notice one person who thinks no one will.